What's up guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to make an RPG game in a week. Don't expect too much out of this game though, because I kind of didn't code much this week. But on with the video. The first thing I did was create a player sprite so that, you'd have some visual when you walk around the world. I gave him a little animation, and then I set up the texture and sprite, and then I did window.draw player sprite, and then I simulated the player, and then I gave him a scale, and then made him move around with WASD and arrow keys as well. And then I made a position vector to store his position, and I set the frame rate limit to 60, and I made sure to invert the thing because that's just how it works. And then we have a working player sprite. Then I made him face backwards so that when you get into a battle, he will be looking backwards instead of at you. And then I included random, and then I pasted the generate random number function AI made me, I don't know how long ago. And then I did some canned battle stuff so that it'll initiate a battle if you have a 1 in 400 chance to initiate a battle when you move. And then it turns you around and then it stops you, so it works. I made him scale up bigger and I have a different position. Then I made a enemy structure to store all the types of stuff an enemy can have, as well as the list. And then I made an area string so that it knows which area to go to depending on like where you are. But I never made any more areas. And then I made a create enemy function so that it'll create an enemy based on the parameters you give it. And then I got AI to make me some enemy ideas so that I couldn't think of anything. Um, then I made a bool to decide whose turn it is, and then if it's not the player's turn, the enemy will attack. And if it is the player's turn, there'll be some more logic later. Then I made it loop through the enemies to render them all on the screen. And I made a texture for the enemies that I didn't use until later. I just did a rectangle for now, but eventually it'll be a texture. Then I made it properly loop through the enemies, and then I made it create a rectangle. I gave all the enemies their values, and then I bug fixed everything that I just did because it was not working. But now we have enemies that can render on screen. And then if it's the player's turn, it'll decide if you press A, so that'll be like the attack button. Because I was planning on adding more functions that you can do, and that never ended up happening. Then I try to create something like extern vector 3, and then to decide how many enemies are alive. I came up with a much simpler option later on because I just couldn't get this to work very well. Yes. Um, it took a while to target the enemies, but um, after a very long time, it finally didn't crash on me, and it works almost. So then I fixed all the code up, and then I made it so that you can kill the enemies. And then I made the code look nicer, and so that it's easier to look at. And then I made the enemies attack the player. It loops through all the enemies, and then it'll damage the player based on the damage of the enemies. And then I made UI, so this is the player health bar. Um, it um, it took a little bit to get working, but once it did, as you can see, there's a health bar at the bottom of the screen. I never made anything happen when you die, but yeah. But now the enemies also have a health bar. So then I made a damage variable for for the player that would go up if you level up if I ever made that system, which I didn't. As you can see, the enemies work now. You do more damage. Uh, so then I made the enemies not render if they don't have enough health. These are the enemy sprites that I eventually ended up making. I made a ton of them. I missed one of the sprites, but I just duplicated another one of the enemy sprites and then just named them that. For some reason, the textures on the enemy sprites are all distorted. I have no idea how that happened, but we're not going to worry about it. And then I made it so that once you kill all the enemies, the battle will end, and then you can go back to your normal spot. And as you can see, it works very well. And then I made it the player animations, so that you can the player animates when he's on the field. So when you're walking around, you can like see him animate a little bit. His legs move around, so it looks like he's walking. It looks pretty cool. But then I made some attack UI, which it got all distorted. I don't know how like why it gets distorted. I don't know. And then see, as you can see, you can even see the 4 on the second attack button. But that was all I did this week. It doesn't seem like a lot, but I was only doing like 15 minutes a day this week. I don't really know. So, um, next week's gonna be a banger video though. So stay tuned. See ya.